Wild Card Brickyard preview. We are about to go over every single wild card game, give our predictions, give our upset alerts, tell you who are the pretenders and who are the actual contenders heading into the playoffs this year. Then we also had Black Friday on Monday. Yeah, we had a bunch of coaches, unfortunately, have to move on to better and brighter things because their end of year review, let's say, didn't go that well, and some teams' quarterly reviews didn't even go that well either. Then we're also going to be talking about an entire sports network crumbling to its knees. That's right. We're addressing the peanut butter skin in those large cans, as Jason Whitlock said. And then we're also going to go over the Jimmy Butler trade and the top five teams. But starting out, a lot of drama happening to start the offseason already. Had a feeling a lot of coaches would get knocked off, but let everyone know just how many teams I know. The Raiders one happened recently. The Patriots one, everyone was up in arms about. But who else got fired because they didn't have a good end of year review?
Yeah, so the Jaguars, they fired Doug Peterson after three very underwhelming seasons, including this past year, 4-13. Come on, dude. The Raiders, obviously, we'll go over Antonio Pierce. I think that's the only one we haven't covered yet. The Patriots fired Gerard Mayo. We talked about it on our live stream on Monday, but everyone's up in arms about Gerard Mayo. The Jets fired Robert Saleh in fucking week 4. Um, and then Matt Eberflus for the Bears. Saints fired Dennis Allen midseason. And then the Cowboys have not renewed Mike McCarthy's contract. And if he doesn't get renewed by next Wednesday, the Cowboys' job will also be open.
So is it gonna be like CeeDee Lamb, Ezekiel Elliott, and Des Bryant and Dak Prescott, where it's like, we don't know if Mike McCarthy's gonna come into training camp this year? Is that what Jerry Jones is doing? He's like, I know we've had wide receivers hold out, and we've had our quarterback hold out, and we've had our star running back hold out, and we've had our star corner hold out. But what would happen if our coach held out into the preseason? Isn't that another way we could generate revenue through the news here? And Jerry Jones is like, well, I'm trying to make history being a dysfunctional organization, and one of the best organizations when VHS tapes were the main consumption of media. So maybe I'll just make Big Mike hold out for a deal.
Yeah. The problem is all these other people also want to find a head coach, hopefully soon. And the Bears asked the Cowboys, hey, can we interview Mike McCarthy because his contract's up? And the Cowboys said no. They said, no, you can't interview with Mike McCarthy. And then also, I saw that Jerry Jones said earlier this week about how he'll never not be the GM because he bought the team and this is his way. So he'll never give up his GM position. He's always going to run the team like it's his team, essentially. So respect to Jerry Jones, but you probably shouldn't do that. You have dementia and you're like 90,000 years old. You're literally a walking ball of dust at this point with a nice southern accent. But the Cowboys, yeah, Mike McCarthy hasn't been fired, hasn't been re signed, but can't interview with other teams. So it makes that job opening maybe the most interesting for the fact simply of what are we doing? Why would we have Mike McCarthy? Like, wouldn't you just choose to like let him go? Like, have you guys had the talk yet? Or are you just waiting, I don't know, until
Till
the
someone
nice
gets
starry
pregnant.
nights of a weekend?
Yeah.
Like, what's our plan here? Is he coming back or not? Are you going to re-sign him or not? Because figure it out. There's other coaches that are interviewing, as we're going to go over in a minute, but ridiculous.
Yeah, no. Are we gonna have the talk now, or are we gonna wait till someone comes home pregnant? Like, what's going
Yeah,
on here? What are we doing? Also, like your head coach needs to be there now. And now that Jerry Jones is the GM and he's not gonna give up GM powers and never not be the GM, it's like, okay, well, the Cowboys are never gonna be good until he dies. What are we gonna have 100-year-old Jerry Jones? Like, or the owner's going to have to vote to, like, well, we have the biggest brand in football just wasting away because Jerry Jones refuses to step down as the GM. Like, at some point, the NFL and some of these leagues need to instill competition rules where, like, hey, if your team isn't good and successful for a certain period of time and it like has to do with the ownership here and it's not just bad luck, in hiring and you are hiring people who are more qualified than you, it's like, okay, it's like maybe we should start implementing where we can like push some of these NBA owners and NFL owners out.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Jerry Jones has owned that team for 40 years now. And the last 25 years, they've been just in the middle of nowhere, just stuck in mediocrity. Meanwhile, we've seen brands like the Yankees win World Series. We've seen the Lakers win championships. We've seen other massive brands, you know, the Red Sox, the Dodgers. You know what I mean? Like, you're ruining this brand that's the most valuable company in the world, valuable team in the world, and they're wasting away in mediocrity when they could be easily the most exciting team if they had the right ownership and GM and head coach involved.
Yeah, no, they could definitely be one of the most exciting teams, and they've had potential here, but they just haven't had the right coach to really put it together because you had Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. Like, okay, like how much better than that is it gonna get? So, as like a grade, would you put the Dallas Cowboys? I don't know how many teams have like a head coaching vacancy, like 7. Would you put them like right above the Jets? Would you say the Cowboys at this point may even be a worse coaching position than the Jaguars or Panthers? How bad would you say it is?
So I think the worst one is the Jets because the Jets are a disaster easily. And when we go over the people they're interviewing for, it makes it even more poetic, honestly. The Saints are a pretty bad situation. I still think the Cowboys are a good situation in the fact that they still have stars on their team. And if they had the right head coach, they could still be where they've been the last 10 years, where they're going to make the playoffs but not do anything. So I think the Cowboys are still like a top spot. Of all of these teams, I would say the Bears, the Patriots, and the Cowboys are probably the best opportunities simply because I feel like they're the closest to competing. Patriots, not necessarily roster wise, but they have the money to make it better. And then the Bears are just need a coach and a competent GM and fixing Caleb Williams, and they're going to be Super Bowl contenders potentially.
Yeah. Yeah, no. The Bears could be interesting. I would say like my bottom 3 right now would probably have to be the Jets, the Cowboys, and then the Jaguars. Like the Raiders at least have cap space, and the Jets are just dysfunctional beyond repair. Like the owner sucks, the city sucks, the state sucks at this point, and it's taken a major fall back. Like we're just assassinating people in the streets. Not saying that there, isn't certain parameters behind that, but at the same time, like with the Dallas Cowboys and the Jaguars, why they would be at the bottom is you may be like, oh, well, we have a quarterback at least. Like that's kind of the problem with both those teams is you have to come into a situation and rebuild a team around Dak Prescott and Trevor Lawrence, who have 2 of the worst deals in the league. I mean, we were talking about earlier how bad Bradley Beal's deal is, but you give Trevor Lawrence, whose prime lasted all of one half of a season into the playoffs and then it was over. Like his prime was from week 13 of 2022 on, and then he beat the Chargers, got injured versus the Chiefs, and then it was over. And then into the next year in 2023, he went 8-4, and then it came crashing down from there. Or 7-4, I think, is where they topped out at.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that they're a mess. So you have Jets, Cowboys, and Jags as the bottom, you said?
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say so because at the Raiders, at least you have Tom Brady there now. And then you also have a high draft pick. You're picking your quarterback, so you aren't fully screwed over for the next 2 to 3 years yet. Where even Sean Payton, this is his second year there, and he's still a little bit handicapped by Russell Wilson's contract, but he still had to punt an entire year
Hmm.
to wait to pick his own guy. Where in Oakland, you don't need to wait to pick your own guy, and then if Tennessee fires their head coach, you also don't need to wait to pick your own guy there.
Yeah, exactly. Raiders are in a good spot because their draft pick, I think they'll still be able to draft a quarterback, whether it's in the first round or in the second round. They can still get a guy to put in there and then still maybe draft a quarterback next year if it doesn't pan out. So they're in a fine spot. Patriots, they have the number 4 overall pick and they have the most cap space in the NFL. And it seems like Kraft kind of wants to get the team back up and running again, which kind of makes me inspired by the Gerard Mayo firing. And then the Saints are a mess simply for the fact that all of their good players are getting older and they're expensive and their salary cap situation is a nightmare pretty much the last decade and it just keeps getting worse. So the Saints I think are a mess simply because they weren't bad enough to get a quarterback this draft and their roster's just good enough where they're just going to be 6-11 for the next couple of years if they don't just fully give up and trade away their players.
Yeah, I feel like if you're the Saints, you just have to trade everyone away at this point, except for Taysom Hill.
Yeah.
And like Taysom Hill is legitimately the one player in the league I can't see in another uniform at this point. Like, I don't want to see Taysom Hill bounce around the league and teams not really know how to use him. Like, I don't want to see maybe the only other team I could see him with is the Philadelphia Eagles for some reason, but anyone else, Taysom Hill's off limits. He has to retire a New Orleans Saint, but like everyone else should go. Derek Carr has to retire this year. I mean, the last play of his season was a perfect exit to his career, I'll say, with just the level of IQ he displayed after he got injured. Like, oh wow, yeah, definitely a franchise quarterback. Not, and then you have Spencer Rattler there, who's looked okay-ish, and then he's kind of just been like a Josh Freeman type quarterback. It's kind of been like how Atlanta's quarterback Desmond Ritter was last year. I know a lot of people. I know Desmond Ritter has his own fan club, but Spencer
Small.
Rattler kind of feels like he's in that class there. But the Saints, at least you're not locked up with a quarterback where you're gonna get huge pushback and you're really putting your job at risk if you move on from them in your first season. Where if you move on from Derek Carr and Spencer Rattler, like that's fine. But if you come in, you're like, all right, we're getting rid of Trevor. Shad Khan's like, no, I just renamed my stadium after this guy and gave him $60 million a year, and then Jerry Jones won't let you do anything, so you're handcuffed there. So it's like at least the Saints, you're not gonna be putting your job at risk. Like look how long they stuck with Dennis Allen for. Like that's like the Patriots keeping Gerard Mayo for 5 years is the
Yeah.
equivalent of how long they kept Dennis Allen for.
Yeah. Well, I think now that these guys are gone, right, they have an opportunity to make things right, right? Dan Campbell, the way he turned around the Lions, and all these other major examples we can use for how these head coaches can impact them. The Chargers with Jim Harbaugh this year, how much they've turned things around. So let's see what these teams are thinking about what direction they might go in. So far, the Jets are currently going to interview 14 people for the role, and they've asked for interviews for Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator for the Lions, Matt Nagy, Kansas City's OC, Brian Flores.
Matt Nagy, oh
Yeah,
god,
it gets worse. Trust me.
why does he
Brian
look right
Flores.
though?
Yeah. Josh McCown, Vikings QB coach, also former Jet. Arthur Smith, Pittsburgh's OC. Mike
Wait, Josh
Vrabel.
McCown,
Yep, Yep,
the
that Josh
the
McCown,
the journeyman.
the journeyman. Yep, head coach potentially. Mike Vrabel, Ron Rivera, as we've talked about before. Ron Rivera, yes, that Ron Rivera, Panthers Commanders head coach, who last time he coached looked like he was out of his wits completely. Um, Sexy Rexy, good old Rex Ryan. You remember Rex Ryan from a decade ago? He's coming back potentially. Jets are interviewing Rex Ryan for potentially a reunion because that'll fix them. Brian Grease, the San Francisco's QB coach. Vance Joseph, Bobby Slowick, Joe Brady for the Bills.
Vance Joseph,
Oh yeah,
because it worked the first time. Jesus.
yep. And then Bobby Slowick, Joe Brady for the Bills OC. Their their head coach that they've had for the last couple of weeks, Jeff Olbach. Darren Rizzi, the Saints interim head coach. Yes, the guy who had veins popping out of his forehead. That guy I think is who they're going to ultimately hire. And then Steve Spagnuolo. That's the
Why?
direction they're going in.
You could cut out some Steve Spagnuolo now. Bro, if someone was going to hire Steve Spagnuolo, you do it 5 years ago. Like, how many years does he consistently have to have one of the best defenses, if not the best defense in the playoffs, to not get a head coaching opportunity? And then if you're listening to me, I say this out of love, Aaron Glenn. If your only option is the New York Jets, if you have any ounce of common sense and self-preservation, do not take this job. I would take the New Orleans Saints job over this. I would take the Jacksonville Jaguars job over this. But like, if this is the last scenario where it's the Jets, the Cowboys, or the Jaguars, like, just don't take it. Maybe go somewhere like the Raiders. I could definitely see him in Oakland. But how many people are on this list that it's like, wait, so we have a quarterbacks coach now who hasn't been a head coach now? That's like if you went out there and hired Wes Welker after 1 year of being a wide receiver coach. Like, are you kidding me? And then Bobby Slowick, who doesn't know how to figure out an offensive line and has issues with his quarterback getting sacked this year and helping him make quick decisions because he's the number one offensive person on that team because his head coach is a defensive guy. That guy who's at a eye gouging defense, like that's who we're gonna interview. Like, how many people do you need to interview? And also, why can't we just make this a reality TV show? Like, honestly, can we make this show like The Bachelors? Because it's been an absolute cartoon for the New York Jets last year. It's been a reality TV show, The Real Jets of East Rutherford, New Jersey. And now let's go ahead and just make it a whole Hard Knocks. And it's just going to be 20 episodes of the Jets interviewing different head coaches. Like, because you're already interviewing 40, so why don't we do two an episode? So we're gonna do the Jets head coaching style Bachelor edition. Like, that's what this feels like. Okay, let me interview as many people as possible. I'm gonna interview people with dementia. I'm gonna interview failed coordinators. I'm gonna interview people who have never been head coaches, and I'm also gonna interview a bunch of failed head coaches. Like, half of the league's failed head coaches are on this list.
It just seems like it's namesake. And also, like, I laugh at Darren Rizzi because that's the head coach right there. The Jets, all these other guys are just getting an interview. They're taking the interview with the Jets because they're trying to further their career. But Darren Rizzi is the Jets head coach this upcoming year because none of these other guys are going to want to go to New York because some of these guys have already been to New York and they already know the circus that is the New York Jets, i.e., Rex Ryan, i.e., Vance Joseph, who I believe had been around the Jets organization before. And then all these other guys, they're not going to go to the Jets. Nobody's going to coach the Jets. Aaron Rodgers is gone. They don't have a quarterback. And then it seems like their defense took a step back this year as well. Plus, you have Woody Johnson as your owner. Like, there's no way that this is going to work for them. It's a nightmare. And plus,
Honestly,
you're hiring your head coach before you have a GM at this point.
yeah, and that's like a good point because I feel like you should go with the GM first. But honestly, as soon as you said Matt Nagy, I was like, that's the guy for the New York Jets. Like, he looks the part. I can just see him in the Jets headset. Like, it just makes sense. Either that or Bobby Slowick. Like, okay, we've gone like defense the past couple of hires, and then last time we hired, but like the Jets are gonna hire Bobby Slowick, and it's gonna be another Adam Gase situation.
Yeah, it's going to be a nightmare. You're talking about with Matt Nagy? Yeah, with Matt Nagy,
No,
it's
not
going to
with
be
Matt Nagy. Matt Nagy's perfectly below average, but Bobby Slowick, we're going
nightmare.
Adam Gase. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a nightmare. He's going to fail 100%. The Bears. This one is also comical. This list of people we're about to mention. Two teams that have proven to be extremely dysfunctional. So Aaron Glenn, Mike Vrabel, Brian Flores, Arthur Smith, Pete Carroll, who is interested in coaching the Bears, Ben Johnson, Mike McCarthy, which the Cowboys declined to let him interview for. The interim head coach for the Bears that won one game for them. That was enough. The Dolphins defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver. The This is the best part. The offensive coordinator for the New York Giants, Mike Kafka, who probably got fired. The Cardinals offensive coordinator Drew Petzing, also an offense that was abysmal. The Ravens offensive coordinator Todd Monken. The uh, Broncos senior personal executive and former Stanford head coach David Shaw. And then lastly, Iowa State Matt Campbell for the Bears.
Matt Campbell from Iowa State. Why does that just make sense? Let's go with the college guy. You know what? Let's go see if we can find the next Chip Kelly. But you know what? Iowa State knows a thing or two about tight ends. So if he can just come in there and then he's going to be like in his first press conference, my goal is I'm going to make Cole Kmet the best tight end in the league. Okay. Now we're talking. We're going to use Cole Kmet right in the offense this year and then also draft another really good one because who came out of Iowa? We got Sam Laporta is from Iowa. He's
All of them.
Cornford there. Yeah,
They're all
like all
from
the
they're
tight
all
ends.
from Iowa. George Kittle.
Yeah.
We have T.J. Hawkinson. I think went there, um, and then Cole Kmet went to Notre Dame, but all of these
Yeah.
guys come from Iowa State. That is a tight end farm there. All of them.
Cornfred.
Exactly. So the Bears with this one, like the top names, everyone's gonna interview Aaron Glenn and all these other guys. Ben Johnson, whatever. But then it worries me that they're interviewing the Dolphins defensive coordinator. Their defense was not good this year. The Giants
What?
offensive coordinator, the Giants offense was the worst, arguably the worst in the league. And then the Cardinals offensive coordinator, Drew Petzing, who, by the way, has been their OC for 1 year. So what are we doing? Why are these
What?
guys? Why are you interviewing for these guys?
These guys have all failed this year. These guys should all be fired. And you're interviewing the Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator? What?
Wouldn't you want to have it so you're trying to unlock Caleb Williams, get the most out of Caleb Williams? How does the defensive coordinator for the Dolphins or the offensive coordinator for the Giants and Cardinals sound? I'm like, no. At that point, blow up the team. Like, enough. I don't want to see a bad offensive. Like, you're going to kill Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is going to become Trevor Lawrence if that happens. He's going to become a bust, and that's unfortunate. And then ultimately, I don't think in it. I'm just the only team I can see. Like, maybe they get Brian Flores, maybe they get Mike Vrabel, but I feel like what's most likely going to happen is they're going to hire fucking the offensive coordinator for the Giants, and we're going to bully them all season long before they fire him.
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely see that happen, but we'll see. That's just a crazy list of failed names, but hopefully they hire someone like Mike Vrabel.
The list gets a little bit better though, because the Jags so far they're interviewing Aaron Glenn, Ben Johnson, Joe Brady, Todd Monken, uh, Robert Sala from the Jets potentially, Kellen Moore, Liam Cohen, offensive coordinator for the Bucks, defensive coordinator Patrick Graham for the Raiders, and then Brian Flores for the Jags.
I like Joe Brady to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I feel like that's a good fit. He kind of unlocked Josh Allen this year through the run game. And he's like, hey, if we run the ball, these passes are downfield are going to be way easier instead of just letting the defense know we're going to throw the ball every single time. Josh Allen doesn't want this guy to go because he knows how bad he can look without a good offensive coordinator to kind of coach him along and hold his hand here. So I could definitely see someone like Joe Brady going to Jacksonville and definitely helping out the Jaguars. Either that or Aaron Glenn if you're going to go defense.
Yeah, honestly, I wouldn't hate Robert Sala either, because offensively they have the weapons. If he can get the right offensive coordinator in there, then I feel like they could potentially unlock Trevor Lawrence a little bit. But their defense has been abysmal, and it's just been pathetic. Maybe with Robert Sala's coaching, they can unlock the Trayvon Walkers of the world and some of the other players on that defense, get the most out of Jonathan Hines Allen or Josh Hines Allen. So I wouldn't hate Robert Sala to the Jags, honestly. Joe Brady sounds like a good fit as well. I don't see Ben Johnson going to the Jags, though. I don't think that's his opportunity.
Yeah, maybe though, but because if you're a coordinator and you can talk yourself into Trevor, look at how awful that division is. Like you can definitely talk yourself into the Jaguars position where you're like, all right, we have the Titans here who may end up firing their coach after a year, but they have the number one pick. If they mess it up, they're screwed. But they still have a lot of work to do. And then the Texans this year absolutely falling off a cliff and dealing with some injuries and they've never really been able to stay healthy. And then the Colts are kind of just in a weird mess where they still haven't been able to move on without Andrew Luck. Like if you can talk yourself into Trevor Lawrence as a head coaching candidate, I think you could make yourself think that the Jaguars position is pretty appealing here. So I could definitely see someone like Aaron Glenn just taking that Lions intensity down to Jacksonville. Maybe he's that energy infusion that they need where he's going to be the one on the sideline getting the team hyped. And I feel like that's definitely someone who could change the culture there because Robert Saleh didn't prove he could go into a horrible organization like the Jets and just change the culture where Aaron Glenn saw Dan Campbell go into literally the worst culture in the league in Detroit, the Motor City, and turn that around. And if you can't learn from that and then do it in Jacksonville, like I feel like he has more to prove at this point than Robert Saleh. I think Robert Saleh needs to take a year or two off and go be a coordinator somewhere else before he gets another head coaching shot.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, he was successful in San Francisco, but the Jets, it was kind of a mess, to say the least. I would be interested to see Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn go to the Jags. I can see that working in either situation. And then the Saints, they have 8 coaches so far. It's Aaron Glenn, Mike Vrabel, Joe Brady, Mike Kafka, who was the, if we remember correctly, was the offensive coordinator for the Giants. So the Saints also interested in Mike Kafka as well.
Why?
And then Anthony
Who's
Weaver,
obsessed with Mike Kafka?
and then the defensive coordinator for the Dolphins, also interested for the Saints. Kellen Moore, David Shaw, who was the exec for the Broncos, as we mentioned, and Darren Rizzi, bringing him back potentially for the Saints.
Kellen Moore.
Kellen Moore. He's got to
Why?
get a
This
head
guy's
coaching
like
job eventually. It's like a cult. I swear to God. Something is in the air.
no, something's definitely in the air with Kellen Moore, but like I don't know, the Saints head coaching opportunity, that'll be interesting. Like I just don't know where I see that one going. Who do you think like makes the most sense though? Like who's your reaction from that list where you're like, okay, maybe they're gonna hire this person because like with the other teams, like feel like someone like makes sense there, but like I don't want to see Aaron Glenn in New Orleans. Who makes the most sense for you?
I feel like they're going to bring back their head coach from this previous year, Darren Rizzi, because even though they weren't very competitive towards the end, I felt like they played with a lot more heart when Darren Rizzi was there. I can see them going the Raiders route where they had Antonio Pierce, and they liked how they played the last half of the season. So maybe they go with Darren Rizzi in this case. That one seems the most likely. And then if they hire the DC for the Dolphins or the OC for the Giants, then go ahead and just wither away into nothing.
Yeah, if anyone hires either of those two coordinators for either the defensive coordinator for the Dolphins or the offensive coordinator for the Giants, like your franchise is getting moved to Canada. You just get a
Yeah.
Wells notice, like, all right, you're officially moving to the 51st state. Actually, no, Greenland. You're gonna start the NFL. We're trying to make Greenland a part of America right now. So why don't you bring some of America to Greenland? So if you hire either of these coordinators, have fun in the frozen tundra.
Uh, yeah, that'd be interesting to see. And then the Patriots, they have Mike Vrabel, Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Brian Leftwich, who was the former OC for the Bucks, and then Pep Hamilton, the former Chargers coach, as well. Um, of these guys, the one that makes the most sense to me is Mike Vrabel. He was a former Patriot linebacker. Seems like he was interested in playing, coaching the Patriots last year before they hired Gerard Mayo, and seems like there's mutual interest there. I feel like Mike Vrabel will be the head coach for the Patriots most likely.
Yeah, I feel like it's a situation though where if you're Robert Kraft and Ben Johnson is interested and Mike Vrabel is equally interested, you have to sit down with yourself and have a real conversation to say like, what direction are we taking this franchise? Because we just had Bill Belichick and then we just hired someone else from that regime. And while Mike Vrabel could be a good fit and a good head coach for us, he has coached before. He kind of already has that cachet and doesn't have as much to prove, even though he will still have a chip on his shoulder and feel like he needs to make this team as good as possible because it's who he played for? Or is it just time where we need to make a cultural shift where Mike Vrabel is too much like the Belichick Patriots and it's always been defense, 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 defense? But what about the offense? Like the offense for the Patriots has been ignored for too long. So I feel like it's time to see someone who stayed longer than he needed to in Detroit, just waiting for the perfect opportunity. Someone like Ben Johnson who can take a look at Drake May. It's like, okay, I can handpick talent. I've been seeing Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell build this team. I know I need to build out from the inside in. We're going to build a great offensive line, play through the running game. And he made Jared Goff, not only with Dan Campbell helping build his confidence up, but it was also Ben Johnson building his confidence up every day in the chemistry he had with him. Imagine that, but with the potential to be the next Justin Herbert or Josh Allen for the New England Patriots. And if you look with Robert Kraft, like I feel like it'll be a really tough decision for him. But in the end, I feel like Ben Johnson's the right choice. Even though culturally, like Mike Vrabel just feels like the same old, same old, same old. It's just time for something new and a completely different switch and going to a much younger head coach who could be there for 20 years. Maybe Mike Vrabel could give you 10 to 15, but how much longer could someone like Ben Johnson give you? And how much of a better relationship would he have with Drake May and developing your franchise would he have than Mike Vrabel instead of, okay, we'll have a tough defense and then Drake May will carry us through some games and then he'll keep changing offensive coordinators every few years.
Yeah, I will say. I mean, Mike Vrabel's been able. I mean, he got Arthur Smith in there. Arthur Smith was successful for the Titans. They were able to get Ryan Tannehill up and running. Mike Vrabel, to me, I think makes the most sense in the sense that the direction the Patriots would go. I feel like the Patriots, same with a team like the Steelers, where they just have a certain identity that has carried with them through so long that that's just become their identity that they never want to shake. With Ben Johnson, it just feels like it's a reinvented Patriots that I just don't imagine them going in that route. I think Mike Vrabel, it fits Boston, it fits New England, it just fits the culture of them a little bit more. Where I feel like Ben Johnson, if they don't immediately see success with Ben Johnson, they're gonna have a lot of questions whether or not he's gonna be the coach for the future. They'd probably give him a couple years of a leash, but I feel like Mike Vrabel will have a much longer leash and can still restore the Patriots to what they were, but um, as long as he gets the offensive coordinator right. I just feel like the Patriots are going to go Mike Vrabel most likely.
Yeah, probably. Especially with how Robert Kraft talked during that press conference. He was like, yeah, I feel like I set up Gerard to fail. I know Gerard Mayo can be a good head coach in this league, but I feel like he just wasn't ready for it. And I feel like I failed him by just hiring him too soon. So he kind of had like that buyer's remorse. And then he kind of regretted hiring him shortly after. It's like, yeah, dude, that's what happens when you don't interview anyone else for the job and you just hire your cousin. Like maybe they're not
Yeah.
ready to be an engineer and you need an experienced one. It'll take time for them to be in leadership. Like, yeah, it takes people time to learn and develop. As you know, the famous Brick Jameson once said, he's just a linebacker who's not playing football anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? They're going to replace one linebacker who's not playing football anymore with another one, Mike Vrabel. A damn good linebacker, if I do say so. And then the Raiders, they fired Antonio Pierce uh, earlier today, and they got so far they're going to submit interviews for Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, and Steve Spagnuolo. So Steve Spagnuolo potentially returning as a head coach. Um, for this one, the Raiders are going to have Brady talking in their ear who's the right fit for them. I have a feeling it's going to be one of these Lions guys. I don't know who. I feel like Aaron Glenn is who I'm leaning towards for the
Hmm.
Raiders. And that would make sense. The Raiders have good pieces on their defense. Their defense itself isn't great, but you have Max Crosby there. I feel like that would make Max Crosby pretty happy. And then you have talent that you've drafted, like, Tyree Wilson, who hasn't really panned out for you so far. Maybe you can get the most out of him. And I feel like if Aaron Glenn can draft some corners, get some safeties in there, then the Raiders defense will look pretty legit. And then whoever their quarterback is, probably be like a Quinn Ewers or Jalen Monroe. Um, then their offense will be a working progress.
Yeah, no, I feel like it definitely will be. It'd be interesting to see whose offensive coordinator would be, but I do think Aaron Glenn deserves a shot. But the Raiders are definitely a project, so you have to be ready for a haul there. But it does scare me that you may not get one of the top quarterbacks in the draft. I could definitely see the Raiders being one of the teams to trade up with the Patriots, and maybe the Patriots trading back with them so for some additional picks and players.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. I think it really depends because there's a lot of great talent. It's not a guarantee that the Browns take a quarterback. Right now, it seems like at one, it's probably going to be Cam Ward or Shador. And then the Giants are going to take whoever the Titans don't pick. And then from there, it's like, how do we feel about Jalen Monroe? How do we feel about Quinn Ewers? and some of these other guys that are coming in the draft. But I think they're going to try to do that same thing where they're going to try to change their identity. I don't know if Steve Spagnuolo is the right fit for the Raiders. I think he could be a good coach for them, but ultimately, I think trying to instill some of the Lions culture, I'm leaning Aaron Glenn just because I don't really picture Ben Johnson with the Raiders. I don't know how that would fit. That just doesn't sound right.
No, yeah, I could definitely see him either in New England or Jacksonville, and he's going to be the one that tries and takes on and fixes Trevor.
Yeah, and that'd be fun to see. I wouldn't mind him on the Bears either, but it would feel wrong for him to go to Chicago. Not that he can't do that, like that's totally fine, but I just feel like if you're going to stay in Detroit for as long as you do, going to a division rival, I just don't think he would do that personally.
Yeah. Could you see if Aaron Glenn went to the Raiders, he facilitates like a Kevin McHale to Danny Ainge type trade with Max Crosby?
Oh, for sure. I mean, if he asks out, if he's not interested with Aaron Glenn, then yeah, for sure. I can totally see that. Where he gets them. Oh, you talking about him going to the Lions potentially?
Yeah, like a hey, like let me do you a favor and I'll do you a favor starting out, and then we get Max Crosby sent over to the Lions for some additional draft capital because they pretty much drafted out their entire team at this point. So now they can start thinking about trading some of those picks for some more top tier talent on that defense.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Imagine Aiden
Because like
Hutchinson and Max Crosby and Ali McNeil on that line. Good
Yeah,
lord.
because like the Lions are one of those teams where like they really don't need any improvement at any position on offense. Like you have two top running backs and you have two really good tight ends. Brock Wright fills his role and plays well in what he's supposed to do. And Tim Patrick has been a good receiver for you. And then out of nowhere, and then Jamison Williams and Amon Ra are there. So like maybe you could draft another receiver if you're not completely sold on paying Jamison Williams with his off the field issues. But like really now you're thinking about just trading some of your draft capital for some more heavy hitters on the D line and the
Yeah.
secondary.
Yeah, exactly. So why not at that point? Because they don't really need their first round pick, and I feel like even their second round pick, they could easily trade up and get someone like a Max Crosby, who sounds like he's starting to get frustrated with losing in Las Vegas. So I wouldn't be surprised if he does end up getting dealt. But so far, that's all the interviews that they're going to have to this point. Where they go, we'll keep you updated there. But NFL offseason already starting, even though we have Super Wild Card Weekend, a weekend that we've been waiting for 18 weeks. And here we are now talking about NFL greatness. This is where legacies are formed. This is where narratives, playoffs, Hall of Fame conversations come to play. Super Wild Card Weekend. So the first game of the week is the Texans and the Chargers. They play at 2:30 on Saturday for our Arizona times. Texans are beat up. CJ Stroud has not played great to this point, and the Chargers, they're still in rebuild, but they have Lad McConkey, who's been great for them. Justin Herbert's been super efficient, and their defense has been excellent. As of right now, the Chargers are favored at 3 points with this game. How do you see this game shaking out? With the
Yeah,
and
this
they're
game
going to
is
going to Houston in this case.
Yeah, going to Houston this game, and I know some people going to this game actually, and it's a Chargers fan. Um,
There we
yeah, I
go.
found another one. So now we know there's 2.5 Chargers fans out there in the world. But the Chargers are heading to Houston. I feel like this is a game where Houston's kind of just been limping into the playoffs, and I don't think that they're gonna get blown out because I think their defense will keep them in it enough. But this definitely feels like a game that's gonna be 34-13, where you're now one of 9 teams to only score 2 points since the 1980s in a game for the Houston Texans. And now Tank Dell is out. Your offensive line is banged up. There's no Stephon Diggs there. It's really just Nico Collins, Joe Mixon or bust. And then CJ Stroud every single play. He's been running for his life and he's been getting gun shy. So I feel like the Chargers defense is just going to eat this Texans offense alive. And then we're going to start to see more of what we've seen the past few weeks, which has been Justin Herbert finding Lad McConkey in the back of the end zone, a solid run game. But the Chargers offense has really started to pick up the momentum the past few weeks. They did play some inferior opponents, but so are the Houston Texans. And I feel like their defense will be pretty demoralized by the end of this game. So I feel like this is going to be one of the clearest locks of the weekend, actually. And this might be the lock of the weekend. And this may be the game that's set in stone the most because if the Chargers don't win this game, are they really the new Chargers or are they the same old Chargers still if you lose to this Texans team? So, like, a loss in this game would be inexcusable. So, I think it's going to play out 34-10.
I like that score, and I agree. I like the Chargers have more momentum. You have the better quarterback. You have the better defense at this point. And with how the Texans' offensive line has been in shambles for pretty much the entire season, really just only relying on Laramie Tunsil at this point, with Khalil Mack and all the other dogs on that defensive line, Chargers should be able to eat them up. I don't see Joe Mixon having a great game either. I see them stopping the run, one of the best run stopping teams in the league. And then on the opposite side, I feel like with how the Chargers have been with their offense, I see Lad McConkey having a big game. I can see potentially seeing a DJ Chark touchdown potentially, but for this, I think it's going to be close in the first half, and then the second half, the Chargers start to trail off. That spread, I think, is a lock, and I also think the Chargers winning is also a lock. We both agree there. So I'm going to go a nicer score to the Texans, but I'm going to say like 27-10. I'm going to go a little bit lower, but I do think that they're going to take care of business and dominate.
Yeah, I mean, the Chargers have proven already that they can score 27 points in a playoff game. So, I feel like that's realistic.
Yeah, hopefully they don't blow it this time. Same old Chargers. It's time to shake the rust off of that. And then also on Saturday, we get potential MVP Lamar Jackson with the heaviest favorite of the week against the Steelers and Russell Wilson. They are favored at 9.5 in a cold 30-degree Baltimore Saturday night game. Heavy favorites here. On my own abode, like the Steelers defense has given Lamar trouble in the past, but I feel like this past game kind of shook that off of him a little bit. He played good football against them. This Steelers team just feels like they're going in torn apart with all the teams. They face the Eagles, they face the Bengals, they face the Chiefs. And at this point, they're just exhausted. I see them limping in to this game. And with Derrick Henry having to stop him, having to stop Zay Flowers, and Lamar Jackson. I just don't know if the Steelers defense can catch up. So I'm going to take this Ravens to take care of business. I see them winning like 34-13.
Yeah, no, arrested Derrick Henry coming into this game too, because they didn't use him too much in their last game versus the Cleveland Browns. It was mostly just for Lamar Jackson to claim the MVP and pad his stats a little bit. But this is just a frustrating Steelers team that found a way to go 10-3, and then they've just limped into the playoffs ever since. And they haven't really been able to get any pressure here. And it's always scary when you play a divisional opponent, but I just don't see a way for the Steelers to beat the Baltimore Ravens. And it's not because of their defense necessarily. It's mostly because of Russell Wilson and just how the offense has looked. Because one of the most you have one of the most overrated quarterbacks now with Russell Wilson, where he had a really good run with Seattle, but he was never really able to put together a great MVP season. He's never received an MVP vote in his life. And then the past few games, it's come down to two Russell Wilson turnovers. Russell Wilson having a mental error and burning 20 seconds on a third down, and then we only have one timeout, and then Mike Tomlin doesn't take that timeout, even though it would have made more sense because if you take a timeout and get a first down, then you can spike the ball, get it out of bounds. So that's also a coaching error that no one was talking about for Mike Tomlin here. And then the Ravens have just been better this year, and the difference with Lamar Jackson is he has Derrick Henry where he can just give him the ball on a given play and he'll go out there and get you 60 yards. And Josh Allen has that with James Cook. Patrick Mahomes has that to a lesser degree with Xavier Worthy, where he can kind of just give them the ball and he'll just make a play for him. Joe Burrow has that with Jamar Chase, but like Russell Wilson, like George Pickens, seems like he hates it in Pittsburgh right now. Ever since Mike Tomlin said he has a lot of growing up to do, he's just been pouting. So now you have a underachieving star receiver, and another Steelers receiver, um, with issues on and off the field, ready to throw down. And I love that about George Pickens, that he's ready to fight anybody. But I wish he was ready to beat any corner and catch any pass to like start. Like, I'm fine if you're going out there and starting fights. It makes football more fun. And I know some people are like, "Oh my god, it's terrible for the game and the integrity of it." Like, no, it's fun to watch guys try and punch someone with the helmet on. Like, I feel like that's entertaining. And then you have Najee Harris, who, oh man, Najee Harris, another year where we just barely get 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. Are you kidding me? With Najee Harris, and then he like just got enough. He was like running well, and then similarly last year with Atlanta, the run game just disappears at the end of the season, and now we're relying on Mike Williams in a playoff game. Now we're relying on I mean, we're relying on the fifth receiver for the Rams and Van Jefferson. That's who we're relying on. And then Pat Fryermuth, who's had some drop issues over the past few weeks and has started now fumbling at the worst possible time. This is just a tough team that Mike Tomlin got the best out of. But like Russell Wilson, like kind of is just who he is, where he gets hot for a couple weeks and then peters off, but to a much worse degree because he's not as athletic anymore.
Yeah, I agree with all of that here. The Steelers, their offense is just I've called them Guantanamo Bay Steelers for the last 3 years. And for like 6 weeks this year, they shook that because Russell Wilson looked great and he played like vintage Russ for a little bit. But now he's back to the Denver Russ who numbers wise, you can look at it and be like, oh, he's playing a fine game. But then you watch the game and it's eye soaringly bad. Yes, maybe he'll connect with George Pickens on a few plays. Yes, maybe he'll connect with Calvin Austin. But for the rest of the game, when it matters most, he's not going to deliver. He's going to fumble. He's going to make stupid plays. And it's what's going to cost the Steelers. And also, this Ravens team, their defense has played better down the stretch. And you have an offense that is impossible to contain. If we're going to talk about how great the Lions offense is, how about the Ravens with the best running quarterback of all time and arguably the best running back of our generation, Derrick Henry, together on the same field? Oh, and we have Zay Flowers as well. Ravens blowout easily. And then,
Yeah, no. Yeah, definitely a
yeah,
Ravens blow. And then does it like the conversation around like Mike Tomlin, like at this point, I don't think he's ever gonna get fired. I think he can stay with the Steelers as long as he wants, and like the media will be like, every single year, I feel like now this time, if he loses in the playoffs, is it going to change anything? And the very next day, the Steelers front office is like, no, it's not going to change anything. Like, we can't be the team that fires Mike Tomlin. I don't think the Steelers ever will. Ever will. Do you think this will change anything if he loses?
maybe if they don't fire him, they'll trade him. But I just don't see a way where he's gone from Pittsburgh. I just don't see it happening. They've been so lenient with him with some of the playoff failures that they've had. I remember like the vintage Steelers, the Steelers with Big Ben at the peak of their powers, losing to Tim Tebow, and he was fine with that. You lost to arguably the worst quarterback of all time, and you also haven't won a playoff game since 2016. Like, come on, at what point are you going to reboot it and be like, okay, since Big Ben, this team has been middle of the pack, and there's just been an annual first round exit. When are they going to fire them? I just don't get it. So I think at this point, he's going to be safe. But if they're going to actually reboot the Steelers and bring them back to their glory, then maybe consider trading Mike Tomlin and trying a new face because it's been 20 years that you've had Mike Tomlin at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think anything's gonna change, and I feel like Mike Tomlin has like done enough where like he'll be able to choose when he leaves here, and I feel like this team, like he has elevated a bad roster, but like there's just certain moments where it's like I go back and forth with Mike Tomlin because I know he is a good head coach, but I just struggle with how good. He just kind of feels like he won his Super Bowl, and a lot of people are like, well, he hasn't been a Super Bowl winning head coach since then. It's like, yeah, well, neither has Kyle Shanahan, and he's going to keep. No one's calling for his job, and like he got to a Super Bowl, won one, and lost another Super Bowl. Kyle Shanahan's lost both of his Super Bowls, so like in that aspect, it's like I feel like someone like Kyle Shanahan also isn't talked about enough to be on the hot seat.
Oh, for sure. I agree with Kyle Shanahan. I will say also with Mike Tomlin, like people have a lot of revisionist history. Let's not forget that last year he was 10-7 with Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph, brought that team to the playoffs, despite the fact that that quarterback room was awful, and they still managed to make the playoffs with their defense. So their defense is still excellent. He's a defensive-minded head coach, and their defense has played excellent for most parts of the season. So I don't think he would deserve to be fired, but maybe consider changing. But I don't. Again, I don't think they will.
Yeah. What about for Harbaugh if they lose?
Harbaugh, I think he's safe. They're not going to fire him.
Yeah. Same thing.
Yeah, same thing. Who are they going to have that's better? Essentially. Let's talk about the Sunday games. So this game, I know you have a spicy take for, but we have the Broncos with Bo Nix and Sean Payton going to Buffalo in a frigid 29-degree day. Buffalo with the second biggest spread of the week with 8.5 for Buffalo.
The second biggest spread, really?
Outside of the
Who has the
Steelers game,
biggest spread?
Ravens
The
Steelers.
Steelers?
Yep. Yeah, Ravens are
Interesting.
favored at 9.5. Bills are favored at 8.5.
Yeah, yeah, no. Initially with this game, it's like, you feel like the Bills should win this game. Josh Allen has had a MVP caliber season. You're the number 2 seed. That's nice. Did you lead your team to the 1 seed? No. People are just giving this guy a lollipop because he had 3 really good games and he hasn't had turnover issues. Like, okay, well, he's led the league in turnovers the past 3 years and he's been one of the league leaders in interceptions and fumbles and turnovers. And now this year, he's not turning the ball over in the number 2 seed. Then he has James Cook, who has 18 touchdowns in the regular season. So, like, so far this year, it seems like this has been a better Bills team. But when you have kind of distractions with your offensive coordinator being interviewed for head coaching jobs, and you have just this young and hungry overlooked team that we don't really know how good they are and kind of all the pressures on you this year. It's like with the Buffalo Bills offense, it seems like there is a formula to beat them. And my problem with this game is this is a drastic head coaching mismatch. I mean, the battle of the Sean, can we call it the Sean Bowl? I'll call it the Sean Bowl, but we have Sean McDermott, who on fourth down is like, it is fourth and 11. You know what I should do? Fourth and 10, whatever it was versus the Kansas City Chiefs. And he's like, you know what I should do? I should run a fake punt with Damar Hamlin. Or he's a coach that's had an inability to make adjustments. In the past few weeks, what have we seen from Bo Nix? Slinging it. And he's coming into the playoffs with winning AFC Player of the Week, where he had an 89% completion percentage. And I know this was against the Chiefs backup, but the week before that, he was also going toe to toe with Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. And when it gets cold and we have a coaching mismatch and a Broncos defense that's played really well and a Bills defense that I feel like can be had this year, I feel like this is setting up to be the biggest upset alert for the week because you can go over like the Packers and the Eagles, but like the upset that jumps out to me the most that no one would be talking about and then just writing the Bills in as a 8-point favorite. First of all, that spread is way too big, and I can't see the Bills just running over this Broncos team. So I feel like if any team is going to be on upset alert, from like the coaching mismatch to how well the Denver Broncos defense has played, like the formula to beat the Bills is make Josh Allen throw it, James Cook, just don't let him get loose, and then contain Khalil Shakir, and then it'll be a pretty good day for you. And the Bills' offense has shown that it can slow down and struggle here. So I feel like this is definitely a game where the Broncos will be able to catch the Bills by surprise here. I don't think the Bills will be expecting in this. I feel like Josh Allen is looking forward to that matchup with Lamar Jackson. I know some people said that, someone in the comments said that if the Bills face the Ravens in the second round, Josh Allen would beat them so bad that he'd be arrested for a hate crime. Like, well, he has to get to the second round first.
Yeah. I don't know if I agree that the Broncos are going to beat them. I think the spread, I would take the Broncos to cover. This game, I do think is going to be close for everything you mentioned. However, I do think that what we're saying with letting Josh Allen throw and containing James Cook and stopping Khalil Shakur sounds a lot easier on paper, but can they do that? I mean, Cortland Pat Surtain's been a great corner this year. He's arguably defensive player of the year. I think he can lock down one of their receivers, but can he lock down all of them? The way that the Bills have been able to spread it around to everybody, whether it's the Amari Coopers of the world or whether it's the players that fill in at the wide receiver position, they still have Dalton Kincaid and they still have a lot of talent on offense. This team is going to be hard to stop regardless. I feel like this is going to be one of the highest scoring games of the week for sure, though, because of the fact the Bills' defense, let's just be honest, it's not very good. They have one of the worst defense in the league, and really it comes down to their offense, kind of in a lesser extent to the what the Lions have been the last couple of weeks. The defense is bad, so therefore I see Bo Nix having a great game. I see Josh Allen also having a great game, and it's going to come down to ultimately maybe their kickers, or it's going to come down to the fourth quarter, 2 minute warning, who has the ball last. I do think this game is going to be a lot closer, and I think this is actually going to be one of the best games of the week, honestly. I'm still going to take the Bills to win this game, but the 8.5 spread, I definitely take the Broncos to cover, even if it's by just a touchdown. I do think that it's going to be a lot closer.
Yeah, and I think since it will be close, like it's gonna come down to coaching. And like that's why I like the Broncos better in this game, is just because it's such a big coaching matchup. And a lot of people are like, well, who's gonna stop Josh Allen? It's like you can let Josh Allen score, and like the Rams went out there and won 44-42, but he's not allergic to playoff meltdowns either. Like he went out there, beat the Steelers pretty badly, who had Mason Rudolph. He's beaten Mac Jones in the playoffs. He has beaten Philip Rivers in the playoffs. He's beaten Lamar Jackson in year two in the playoffs without any help on offense. And oh, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, that 13-second game, he should have won the game against the Chiefs. If his defense could stop Patrick Mahomes for 13 seconds, he wins that game. Or if he wins the coin toss, he potentially wins that game. So he hasn't beaten any great quarterbacks, but that 13-second game, like he played perfect that playoff series, and he played the Patriots game. He had a perfect game basically. So he's still a playoff performer for sure. It's just at the end of the day, he's had that Bengals game that's a blemish on his resume, and then the Chiefs game, the first time they faced, definitely a blemish for sure. But I think we can say that Josh Allen is a playoff performer based on just if we have the full games in front of us. I would say that 6 of those games were great, and then 4 of those games we could probably argue not so much.
Yeah, we can say he's like a playoff performer to the same level of James Harden, where James Harden did get to conference championships and faced off against the Warriors. And, his crime was playing in the same era as Steph Curry when he was at the peak of his powers. But, Josh Allen's crime is playing at the same in the same era as Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and Patrick Mahomes, all at the peak of their powers. And, Lamar hasn't beat him head to head in the playoffs, but he beat him this year in the regular season where he went 9 for 30. And then also, like Mahomes has beaten him in the playoffs, where it's like you consistently beat this team in the regular season now, but you still can't do it in the playoffs.
Yeah, this is a prove it year, and I agree with that. But I still think the Bills can beat the Broncos at the end of the day. I think it's going to be close game, but I'll take the Bills to still cover and win that. Well, not cover, but still win that game. And then another game that definitely, in my mind, has probably one of the biggest upset alerts: Eagles and Packers. Jordan Love was banged up last week. He came out against the Titans, but it looks like he's going to be ready to go. And then Eagles, they're going to have Jalen Hurts most likely playing this game. Um, right now, Philly is favored at 4.5. Unclear whether or not Jalen Hurts is going to play. I know he's battling a concussion, but right now, this game, this would be the third largest spread of the game. But Eagles and Packers. Eagles maybe a better defense. Packers, Jordan Love in the playoffs.
Packers Jordan Love in the playoff, and it's tough because I feel like Saquon Barkley and the Eagles offense is good, but like in the regular season when it's just Saquon Barkley kind of going out there and making plays, now the whole game plan is going to be centered around stopping Saquon Barkley, and then it's going to be Jalen Hurts, who really isn't in a rhythm. You have friction going on with him and AJ Brown at this point. I feel like the Packers matchup like offensively with the Eagles defense on the flip side will also be tough just because of that front line, but Jordan Love is someone who has been able to show up in the playoffs where he had that one game versus the Lions last year where they absolutely ran them out of the building, which was a team kind of in a similar position where they're kind of dysfunctional the past few years, pulled it together, and then ended up getting the 2 seed, and their defense was hyped up to be a Super Bowl defense, then kind of fell apart a little bit in the playoffs. So I feel like the Packers will have at least better chemistry, but I'm just worried about what's going on with Jalen Hurts right now. Like, is he in concussion protocol, and how ready to go is he going to be for that game? But I do think like the Packers, as soon as they saw the score with the Commanders, that there's a possibility that they were able to lose. Jordan Love ended up coming back into the game, so that tells you like he wasn't necessarily badly hurt. They just didn't want to take any chances with his elbow. And they said, okay, we'd rather play the Philadelphia Eagles in the first round than not have Jordan Love at all in the playoffs.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think in this game, like this is a game that we're going to overlook the Packers because they don't have the AJ Browns on that side, and like Saquon Barkley is the rushing king at this point. Eagles defense may be slightly better, but I also think that we're looking at playoffs at the same time. So you have to look at it from a different lens. Jordan Love proved last year that he's a playoff performer. He went out there and obliterated the Cowboys, completely embarrassed them, and then he went out and nearly beat the 49ers as well. So Jordan Love's a playoff performer, and there's no doubt about it. So I expect him to take it to another level. See him essentially being the seventh seed crusader at this point. If he can go back and beat the Cowboys last year, which I think was probably the easiest game to pick last year when we picked that prediction, because let's not forget that we were the only sports show that did predict them to beat the Cowboys. And then this year, something's in the air with the Eagles. I think if we're going to talk about a coaching mismatch with the Broncos and Bills, I think there's also a coaching mismatch with the Packers and Eagles. Matt LaFleur, top five head coach in the league. Nick Sirianni, I don't know if he's necessarily a bad head coach, but the fact that we need security guards to hold him back because of how fiery he gets and how aggressive he gets in these games. If the Eagles fall behind and they start to miss throws, if AJ Brown maybe has a drop, I can see the Eagles completely crumbling. And I wouldn't be surprised by that, which then their defense unravels. And if Jordan Love is picking them apart, which I think he can do, I'm picking the Packers to upset the Eagles. I do think the Eagles are going to bounce.
Yeah. Do you think it is going to be a close game throughout it, or is it going to be similar to just that Dallas game where they just came out and obliterated them?
I do think the Eagles are a lot better than the Cowboys of last year. So I think it's going to be they're competitive in the first half, but I do think the Packers maintain control. And then fourth quarter, probably a last second Josh Jacobs touchdown that makes the score look more inflated. But I feel like we're probably going to see like a 34-21 type of game.
Yeah, and I feel like the thing people haven't been talking about with the Packers is everyone's talking about Toyotathon Jordan Love, but how about Josh Jacobs over the past few weeks? It seems like Josh Jacobs has really been turning it in the high gear, and they've kind of been saving him for the end of the season, but he's been able to really carry their offense through certain stretches, and you have tight ends like Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave who you can hold back and block, but they can also go out there and get touchdowns for you. At least Tucker Kraft is a great red zone target. Christian Watson not being there hurts, but they've kind of just have this rotating cast of talent here. And I will say, like, this game does feel like a quarterback mismatch where I feel like Jordan Love, eye test wise, just has looked better throughout the season than Jalen Hurts has. It looks more natural. He looks like a better quarterback. And is he going to be like a modern day Eli Manning with talent where he just goes on a run as a wild card year in and year out? Like maybe with the Green Bay Packers, but one thing is he will rip it and he's not afraid to. And then Matt LaFleur in the playoffs will actually have a game plan. The Packers offense is always using motion. He's really good with setting up misdirection. So I feel like he'll be able to take advantage of some of the Philadelphia's flaws on defense there. So I feel like the real question mark will be, can the Philadelphia Eagles defense take advantage of the Packers offensive line? But if the Packers offensive line can hold up and they're able to protect Jordan Love, then I feel like it's a no brainer that the Packers win.
All right. So you're riding with the Packers upset as well?
Yeah, right now, right now it feels like the Eagles should win this game, but I think that the Packers will pull it out.
Hell yeah. And then this game, I feel like it's going to be hard to pick, but Bucks and Commanders. Bucks are at home. They have a 3-point spread. The Bucks have now made the playoffs 6 consecutive years. This is now the second year in a row with Baker Mayfield having his best season, 4,500 yards, 40 touchdowns. Commanders with their new shiny toy Jaden Daniels, first playoff game against this Bucks team. Bucks now with an improved running game from last year with Bucky Irving. How do you see this game shaking out?
Yeah, this game, what it's really about is a team that has been to a Super Bowl. You still have some of the pieces from that roster, and then you also have a head coach who was one of the coordinators on that Super Bowl team, and you've won your division 3 straight years now with the Washington Commanders. We've seen a team like this get hot at the end of the season. I don't think they're going to crumble, but I just don't think they're going to have that playoff experience to really go out there and win because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have proven that without Tom Brady, they can win a playoff game, and they absolutely obliterated the Eagles last year. And I think this Commanders team is better. However, I think defensively they'll be able to slow down the Commanders. The Commanders running backs worry me. I don't care that Brian Thomas Jr. got shot. I just want him to hold on to the ball. Same with Austin Eckler. And then Terry McLaurin, and he's really the guy you have to focus on taking away for the Washington Commanders, and they've had some turnover issues. So with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think that they can go out there, defend their home turf versus the Washington Commanders, and it's Sunday night football. Baker shows up in these big moments, and then also this is the best running core that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers has had, where they've really been going to Bucky Irving now as the number one running back. Called it, by the way, the gas station himself. Bucky Irving coming at you. And then we have Mike Evans, just that play of Mike Evans getting a $3 million bonus and his team just having something to rally around heading into the playoffs. I feel like that's a lot of momentum for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So in this scenario, I just have to go with experience over youth because I feel like it's a fairly even matchup. And when it is a matchup that's that even, you have to go with the team that's actually been there and got it done in the biggest moments.
It sucks. I really want to pick the Commanders in this game because I do think Jaden Daniels, with how he's been in the fourth quarter this year and some of the clutch moments he's made, I do think that he's going to be a clutch playoff performer. I think like what we saw last year with CJ Stroud and how he uh, tore apart the Browns defense. I can see him doing the same thing with the Bucks. However, I also know on the other side we have Baker Mayfield, who a lot of people don't want to admit this, but I'm a guy who doesn't care for the scrutiny. Baker Mayfield is a clutch playoff performer. Okay, his QBR mimics, I'm not kidding, Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. His QBR is like 110 in the playoffs, and he's gone toe to toe with these guys. Now, I know Baker Mayfield is not the greatest quarterback in the world, but in my heart, he is. I'm picking Baker Mayfield simply for the fact of I'll pull up his playoff stats. His playoff stats are actually no joke. People want to joke about it, but when we have playoff Baker, there's very few teams I'm going to pick him losing to, just for the sake of it, right? I know he's only played in 4 playoff games, but his QBR last year when he played in the playoffs was 106. His 10 touchdowns to 3 picks, 62% completions. Baker Mayfield's that guy when it comes to the playoffs. Not only that, I think their team is still better overall. While I do think Jaden Daniels will show flashes, I got to go with the Bucks simply because I'm not going to bet against Baker Mayfield in the playoffs.
Yeah, I can't bet a bet against Baker Mayfield at this point. At this point in the playoffs, he turns into Bobby Flay. This is my house. Can you outcook me? Let's do it. Beat Bobby Flay, beat Baker Mayfield. So yeah, I feel like Tampa going over it with experience, like Washington can win this game. But I'm just gonna lean Tampa Bay Buccaneers because if you win this game, then every other NFC opponent has some major flaws. So I feel like Tampa can maybe find themselves in the conference championship this year because if you have to face the Rams or the Vikings in the next round, I feel like that's definitely a situation where the Bucks could compete with them, or we're gonna get a heavyweight rematch with the Philadelphia Eagles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where Philly beats you 1 year, Tampa beats you the year after, and then we get the trilogy. So I feel like if we get a trilogy there in the second round, that would be good as well. So Tampa could easily, if they win this game, find themselves in a conference championship, and then rematching with Detroit, another trilogy where you beat us in the playoffs, we beat you in the regular season, hand you one of your two losses this year. All right, now let's actually decide who the best team here is.
Yeah, I can see it. Absolutely. Especially, I feel pretty confident about this Packers game. I don't know why. I just have a hunch. So, Packers would face the Lions, and then whoever wins this game on Monday night is who you'd face, and I honestly think they could beat either of these teams. So the Bucks are in a good place to make the conference championship, which brings us to our last game, Vikings and Rams. Right now, Vikings are favored at 1 point on the road, going to SoFi Stadium. Um, in this game here, the Rams are a weird team because while I don't think that they're better than the Vikings, the ugly games that they've been in this year honestly leans me to picking the Rams in this game because what I saw from Sam Darnold against the Lions was a guy that melted down and a guy that the Lions gave the plan. This is how you beat Sam Darnold. Apply a bunch of pressure and make him miss these throws. And I feel like the Rams can take that and do that. With honestly, their pass rush hasn't been that bad this year. Their defense has shown that when they need it to step up, if their offense is struggling, that they can win. And I think the Rams, they have the experience. Sam Darnold has never been in a playoff game. This is his first playoff game. Can he shrink in the moment? He shrunk in the moment before in the regular season. So is it impossible that he does it this year? Absolutely not. The Rams have experience. They've won a Super Bowl. They have an offense with Matt Stafford, who obviously has won a Super Bowl as well. Kyron Williams is a good running back there, too. So just going with experience, just like how you picked with the Bucks, I got the Rams winning this game. And I do think we're going to see Sam Darnold maybe not have the same type of game that he had against Detroit, but I do think he's going to be lesser than what he's been this year.
Yeah, I do think he'll be lesser than what he's been this year, but the Vikings have been good about bouncing back from controversy here. And I feel like at this point, it's like, okay, yeah, the Rams have been consistent and they've been good in ugly games, and they will have what it takes in big moments. But I do think that with Brian Flores there defensively, he's due for a bounce back game where the Lions just had their number and they were really pushing the Lions at some point where it took Jameer Gibbs having 4 touchdowns and really getting loose on a couple of plays to blow the game open with Minnesota. And then also with the Vikings, what you can learn from is don't let the other team pressure you into playing their game. And one of the reasons why they lost that game was not necessarily because of Sam Darnold. And I know he was 18 for 41 and played terrible in that game, but it was also Kevin O'Connell, where psychologically you have 2 chances in the red zone where you go for it, and then you don't end up taking the points where you would have been up 12 to 10 at one point versus the Detroit Lions. They would have been trailing for one of 3 games all year that they've trailed. So you're also putting more pressure on them. So I feel like you will have more of an opportunity because just defensively, I just don't think the Rams have the manpower to contain Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. And then Aaron Jones, I believe, will be able to get going because at times the Vikings were able to move the ball. And people forget that the Lions are one of the top 3 teams in the league, even though they're not talked about as much as they should be. So at this moment, I think the Vikings are the better team. They played better all season. They were 14-2 for a reason. Then, even though Sam Darnold showed he will struggle at times, I feel like this is going to be an ugly game. But someone like Justin Jefferson or Aaron Jones is going to come in clutch for this team. And the Rams, I just don't think are good enough, as good as they were last year. They just don't feel as good defensively and offensively. They're not as dynamic as they were last season.
Okay. So with this rematch, right? Because this is a game, their second loss of the season, that being the Vikings, came against the Rams. We saw Matt Stafford dice them up. We saw Kyron Williams get loose for a few plays. Puka Nakoa. Um, so we're seeing this game. Do you see this being more of like an offensive type of game where both teams are putting points on the board, or closer to what the Ram style has been, which it seems like they've had these games where it's you know 15-6 or 12-3, games like that? You think it's going to be more defensively or ultimately more of a high scoring game?
Yeah, I feel like this will be more of a timid defensive battle where it's just one of those games like how like that entire first half of the Lions Vikings game just felt tense.
Yeah.
I feel like it's just gonna be like that. So I feel like you'll be able to go back, look at the tape with where Sam Darnold went wrong, and the Vikings have bounced back well to adversity this year. And Kevin O'Connell will have time to really self-reflect your Monday Night Football, so you have some extra time to see what you did wrong. And sometimes having your worst game can be a good thing for you because if you want to go out there and get paid this year, and you're Sam Darnold, you have 50 million reasons and 4 years to go out there and ball. this game. So you ball out this game, you potentially go out there and get $200 million from someone. So um, I just think they're going to go out there and get it done with that. And I feel like it's going to be 27-24 type of score here, either that or like 23-17.
Yeah, I think that's a good score. I see it kind of playing out the same. I'll pick the Rams, you pick the Vikings, but super wild card weekend. The last Monday Night Football game we're going to see of the season, and then we go into the semifinals this upcoming week. So this is going to be sick. I can't wait for the culmination of this playoff run. Who will end up victorious? But there were other speaking of victorious and scandals and greatness here. What
Yeah.
was FS1, and what was the new wave, the new alternative to ESPN about 10 years ago with the Colin Cowherds of the world jumping over and a number of other former ESPN people going to FS1. Now there's a scandal. We talked about it briefly on the Monday show as well, but FS1, World of Hurt, Joy Taylor's name getting absolutely dragged. Skip Bayless, another person who's getting dragged. Emmanuel Acho, all these people are part of this lawsuit.
Yeah,
So
no, all these people are part of this lawsuit, and if you go into the playoffs and win this weekend, one could say you would be joyful that you went out there and won. Some would say, and this lawsuit came out, and I feel like we both looked at that and we're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I've never hated Joy Taylor, but I've never thought that she's has any unique opinions or anything that's been totally original or she's blown me away with the take before. And that's not because she's Joy Taylor. It's just because not a lot of sports analysts have a unique opinion or can see things coming as far in advance as we have or we've called. And she's someone who started out on Miami radio. Okay, well, what team did her brother play for? Oh, the Miami Dolphins. Jason Taylor. And then so she started out with some radio work, and then they wanted her to go from some radio work to working on Speak for Yourself with Jason Whitlock. And they were gonna originally do it. They did a test with Joy Taylor, and then Jason Whitlock's like, no, I don't want to work with Joey Taylor. And his reason was because I don't want to work with a woman, but he also said, I don't want to work with someone who's inexperienced. So he recommended some other names. And eventually he unfortunately had to work with Jason McIntyre there. Ends up being Colin Cowherd. Then they bring in Marcellus Wiley for that show. And then Joy Taylor goes to Undisputed. You're like, okay, just a host on that show, goes to the Herd, and then suddenly gets her own show there. But she just kind of felt like a plant. I've always kind of thought of her as an industry plant as well because her brother played football and she kind of put herself out there with most of her outfits there on Fox
mm,
Sports. So finding out that she was potentially sleeping with a producer or a co-host, does that really surprise me? No. This is Hollywood. There's a bunch of attractive people in the same building. You see each other every day. When attractive people are with each other all the time and are successful, it can happen. you know?
yeah, I wasn't surprised by this at all. This is something that I think a lot of people probably thought in the back of their mind with her. I mean, and it's unfortunate because I think there's a lot of talented female broadcasters in the world, and I think Joy Taylor, in her own right, is a fine commentator. But it's unfortunate that this is coming out, and all these people who are going up in the sports world, especially females, like it's unfortunate that it's going to impact them and the way they think how they have to be successful is this way. So it sucks. But am I surprised by this at all? No. And then the shit about Skip Bayless with the woman demand paying her 1.5 million. Like, first of all, pathetic. Why would you pay $1 million to have sex with a woman? Just I don't know, have sex with another attractive female. There's millions of them in the world, and you're Skip Bayless. Like you can do it without shelling out that kind of cash. So that's the other thing. Um, but this
Yeah.
FS1 thing is just bizarre, honestly.
Yeah, it's bizarre, and it's something where it's I'm kind of not surprised that I saw this coming. It's Joy Taylor slept with her co-host and her boss, to get a role on the show. Okay, yeah, that's been going on in Hollywood for how long now? And it's been going on at FS1 for how long right now? With Joy Taylor, and I feel like the unfortunate part of it is just as other female commentators coming up. It's like, well, if you're taking away an opportunity from someone who like worked hard and deserves that role, like I'm a big believer in the best candidate for that role should get hired for that role, and that should really be your experience and your resume and your work ethic, whether you're putting it in in different ways. She was definitely putting in work, but was it in a broadcasting? Maybe not, but I feel like it does hurt other talent coming up, and that's the unfortunate part of it, is that it kind of continues a, I guess, assumption about females in sports where you can only do it if you're hot, or sleeping with your boss, or she's only there because she did that, instead of someone like Doris Burke who's worked incredibly hard, someone like who's
I, I would shout out Michelle Beadle too.
yeah, someone like Michelle Beadle, and then there's other like great female commentators, someone like Abby Chin, who's worked on like local radio for a while, and they really worked hard and worked their way up the ranks here. And then Doris Burke is now calling the NBA Finals. But I feel like there's been plenty of other people that did it the right way, and it kind of just hurts other talent come up, and then it continues that stigma around it. And is it right that there's a stigma? No, but are you helping it? Like, no, definitely not. But also, can I blame her for doing it? No, not at all. If
No,
you're willing to do that and you're willing to get a top TV role and like compromise your moral compass where it's really not compromising your values to do that, then fine. You went out there and you got yourself paid. Congratulations.
honestly, if the roles were reversed, I'd probably do the same too. So I
If
can't
Joy
blame her
Taylor was
for it.
your producer and was like, hey, if you want this gig,
I'd be like, "Fuck yeah, I'll get promoted and get paid. Why not?" So I don't blame her. I mean, I don't know. Depending on, I mean, I don't know. Some of these executives at Fox are you kind of, it's kind of a lack of pride. I feel like to some extent, but the roles were reversed. If I needed to hook up with my co-host to, well, not in this case, but if I was at FS1, right, and there was a producer that's like, hey, if you do this, then you're gonna get paid and get promoted. Like, yeah, I don't care. Maybe I'm just, I don't know, sadistic. Maybe I'm just a freak in some extent, but that's okay. I mean, you got
yeah.
sometimes you got to think with your wallet and not your pride.
Yeah, and then people like also dragging Emmanuel Acho for this. I'm like, I didn't like Emmanuel Acho before because I feel like he's very geeky and theater kid. And he's a young up and coming commentator where they want to find like the next Stephen A, but like just the soliloquies he goes on, it's like how much of nothing to just have a generic hot take and farm engagement can I do? It's like when you have to resort to stealing takes from Dan Orlovsky and you're like, he's like one of those like rappers who just raps really fast. And then you look at the lyrics and you're like, okay, it's impressive that you can rap fast, Joyner Lucas, looking at you. But are you saying anything at all? You're just trying to farm engagement, similar to what he did with some of his major songs. Like I'm Not Racist. He's like playing off of tragedies and then going viral off of it, kind of similar to what Emmanuel Acho does. And then he just raps really fast. Emmanuel Acho talks really fast. But now that this happened, like, okay. It's like Emmanuel Acho
Respect.
goes up a little bit, and then you have all the videos coming out. There's a video of them sitting in a hotel room and he's barefoot and they're holding like drinks. Like, what did you think was going on? It
Oh
was like
yeah.
too hot. I'm hot. I'm a former athlete. You're hot. You're the brother of a former athlete. It just makes sense. And then people are mad at it. It's like,
Plus, also, if we really want to dig between the lines, Joy Taylor was married to Earl Watson, who was also a person on FS1 for a long time. So again, this isn't like super surprising at all. Also, yeah, for Emmanuel Acho, like, good for you, man. Like, there you go. You got Joy Taylor. That's awesome. But yeah, again, like it's they're all attractive. They're all rich and good looking. Like this isn't. I don't think we should shun them for it because I feel like if we were in those positions, and this is also for the audience too, like I would do the same. Like I think if the roles were reversed, we would all act the same way, and we would not. We shouldn't roll with that moral compass like as if we're above them. Like no, no. If we were in this position and we had a bunch of attractive co-hosts and they said, "Hey, we're gonna get you promoted if you do this," like, yeah, we're gonna probably do that.
It's also sports. Like, why are we taking it so seriously?
Yeah, they literally go on every day and spew nonsense, and they just say a bunch of dumb takes. Like, sure, that's like, who cares what they're doing behind the scenes? This honestly makes it more interesting to hear what they have to say now that I know what kind of freaky shit they're in.
Yeah, and now you can kind of see it in their eyes now because everyone knows about it. So it's like it's public. Like all this did was make it public, but no one was surprised with Joy Taylor there. And then also like with Emmanuel Acho, it's like okay, yeah, he had the opportunity to have Joy Taylor as their co-host, and then he just has like all these social media posts about how amazing Joy Taylor is, and just like going on rants, and it's like where did all these cringy rants come from? And then you're like, oh, that's a man that just maybe had the best night of his life the night before, so of course he was hyped up for that. And
Yeah.
maybe he's acting a little bit like a simp, and we don't all move like that. Not everyone likes a simp, but he is on one of the biggest shows now. He has his own show on FS1, so it's like, all right, like, it worked out for him. And then the thing with Skip Bayless too I want to talk about is, like, Stephen A literally came out and he's like, "No, Skip's too cheap for this. Skip would never, like, Skip Bayless is cheap." And then, Marcellus Wiley was talking about it, and he's like, "They're probably in the dressing room, probably got a little bit flirtatious," and Skip Bayless threw out, like, and she was like, "I would never do that for $1 million," and it was probably joking back and forth, but when you see, "I'll pay you $1 million, to do this" on paper, it sounds a lot different than how it coulda sounded, like, playfully if you have that rapport and you're with each other every day. But Skip Bayless, like, I've seen him talk about what he does on his first date, and on his first dates he's literally like, by the way, my career is more important than you, and I don't want to have kids. I know it's the first date, but is that okay with you? Like, this is someone who's so locked in. He's sending LeBron James every single morning. He takes a picture of his alarm clock and he's like, "You up, Bron?" And it's like 2:30 in the morning. And he's someone who's always locked in. He just drinks Diet Mountain Dew. It's like maybe Skip Bayless is secretly a freak, but he's also a little bit awkward because he had a weird childhood growing up. And he had to pay someone $1.5 million. Sure, but like Stephen A, who's close to him, has said this guy is way too cheap. This Skip Bayless I know would never do this. And then also, when Jason Whitlock and Marcellus Wiley, like it's probably just some playful banter in the locker rooms. Like at the end of the day, it's just allegations, but like really no one cared about it at all. It's like everyone focused on Joy Taylor. They're like, oh my God, how could she scam us into thinking that she was this amazing TV host when everyone could see that she was a plant from a mile away with Skip Bayless? Everyone's like, yeah, I could see Skip having to pay 1.5 million. Like, I don't blame him.
Yeah, in my mind, I'm like, why would you pay that? I'm thinking with my wallet in this case, I'm like, if you're gonna hook up with someone to get leveled up and make more money, yes. But if you're gonna pay somebody, an attractive woman, $1.5 million, why would you do that? And Skip Bayless, like his wife was good looking, and I feel like he's a fit guy in his 70s. Like I think that there's somebody out there who's attractive, probably to the same level as this hairdresser, that he could probably shag if he wanted to. So again, like I don't know how legit that rumor is. When I heard that 1.5 million, I'm like, I don't know how legitimate that is. And now that it's talking about like what's this played in a playful manner, makes me think that it's a little bullshit, which kind of cracks in the armor of this lawsuit if it is legitimate. But I guess time will tell whether or not it is.
Yeah, some of the things in the lawsuit make sense, like with Joy Taylor and her husband, Earl Watson, getting divorced. And then she was also engaged to someone else who allegedly found out about it. And they were also referenced in the 42-page deposition here. So, I feel like there could be some truth. But at the end of the day, it is just allegations and it is just a lawsuit. But like, this is not really shocking. And there was no like rape allegations. And there was no like, oh, I was forced to do this. It was more of just if you want upward mobility in your career, I'll hold you back, which should never happen. But it's the same thing. It's not, it doesn't seem like it's bad as a Harvey Weinstein situation. Like no one's like
No.
going to jail. It's just all lawsuits and it's all civil suits. Like there's nothing criminal alleged. It's like, okay, yeah, a corporation in America is shitty. Who would have thought?
Yeah, who would have thought? I will say Colin Cowherd, he's looking like a saint in this lawsuit. They keep saying like Colin Cowherd, really nice guy, super gentleman, super dorky, just what you'd see on TV sort of Colin Cowherd. So I guess he's safe from the allegations.
Bro, divorced 3 times, like, this guy or divorced twice, he's on his 3rd marriage. Bro is locked in. Like, bro's not playing any games anymore. He's locked into his career, he's locked into his kids, he has a family now and his wife, like, he's probably been through it all, and at this point, he's like, "Not worth it." And every guy will get to a point where he realizes chasing thoughts just isn't worth it. Like, you do it for your ego, you do it so you can flex on other guys, and it can be a fun time, but most guys get to a certain point where eventually they're like, yeah, that's actually not as important as my career and my family right now. Because if he's mentioned in this lawsuit, then okay, then he's hurting everyone at the volume who he employs. And like that affects someone like Jason Timp, Ryan Russello. Doesn't really bother me if Nick Wright was hurt by that, but Colin Cowherd just being mentioned as a saint, and then kind of FS1 East going out there with Chris Broussard, Kevin Wildes, Nick Wright, not even mentioned in this, just out in New York having a good time on first things first in their primetime spot.
Yeah, walking in the cold. Well, I guess we'll see how this FS1 lawsuit plays out, but it's going to be interested to see when more information comes out about it. But FS1 Super Wildcard Weekend, there is some NBA news though. Jimmy Butler looks like he's out in Miami. We haven't figured out where he's going yet, but it seems like this week he's most likely to be traded. Right now, the popular destination is flowing it around is the Suns. Um, According to Bill Simmons, he should be dealt this week, though.
Yeah, Bill Simmons says Jimmy Butler's going to be dealt this week, but it seems like teams like the Bucks, Warriors, are all out on him right now. However, there's a couple teams that he could be dealt with, but it seems like the dark horse front runner right now for Jimmy Butler is going to be, if they just need to deal him and no one's interested, is going to be the San Antonio Spurs. With the Spurs, it makes sense. You have someone like Victor Wembanyama who is already coming into his prime. Dude is literally only 20. People used to say that with Jason Tatum, but Victor Wembanyama is still young and he's going toe to toe with Giannis tonight. He may be the first player in NBA history with the most blocks in a regular season and the most 3-point attempts in a regular season. That's the kind of streak that Victor Wembanyama's been on, and he's really one of those guys where Jimmy Butler, if he's healthy and he is able to play like versus some of these Western Conference teams, like a duo of Jimmy Butler and Victor Wembanyama, and if you potentially keep Chris Paul, maybe move on from Chris Paul because he's not a playoff performer. Like that's a duo where it's like two players like LeBron and Kyrie. Not saying that they'll be to that caliber, but just two players who can go out there and dominate a series that no one would want to see. Because I feel like outside of there's not really a team where I feel like they couldn't compete with and push to a 7-game series. I feel like they could compete with the Thunder via Jimmy Butler just trailing SGA and Victor Wembanyama going off. Denver has some issues shooting, so I feel like they could stick around in a series like that. And then anyone else, like the Timberwolves, are a joke and they're a laughing stock after that Carl Anthony Towns trade. It looks like one of the worst trades in NBA history with how Cat's been playing and how we knew Julius Randle would play. So like in the West, if Jimmy Butler gets traded there, and then you're able to pick up some other guys at the deadline, like the Spurs have had some pretty good players on their team. Like you have Sohan there, you have Johnson, who's played well for you, and Victor Wembanyama. So like Wemby in the playoffs with the Jimmy Butler who can turn back the clock a little bit, like. I feel like that would be the best destination for Jimmy Butler to go.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the Spurs is a good fit for him because, first of all, you have Greg Popovich, one of, if not the best head coach of all time. And then I think, is he in the same era now that he was with Miami, where he's leading them to multiple finals appearances? Probably not. But being the second piece on that championship title, I think, is very important. He's the guy that can get a bucket at any time and go on these absolute hot streaks, just like what we saw in multiple playoff runs, whether it's the bubble series against the Lakers or his second finals run. But he's proven that he can contend and elevate in the playoffs. So I feel like for a team like the Spurs, who is in the mix and is definitely able to jump at least out of that play-in tournament, Spurs would be a good fit there. I don't really know who else could really fit there. I don't really love right now the Suns are floating around. I don't know if that's going to fix their problems. For the
Yeah.
Suns, like getting rid of Bradley Beal, who's willing to accept a bench role or at least come off the bench in certain games. Like, I don't think trading him for a guy who's 35 and probably past his prime at this point. I don't know if that's going to benefit the Suns, especially because they already have KD, who's already old. Like, you're going to just make your team extra old, and you already have Bradley
Yeah.
Beal, and you already have Kevin Durant. Like, that's not going to solve any problems for you. And plus, you don't have any assets to trade them either.
No, the Suns seem to be interested in Bam. If Miami decides to blow it up this year, like Bam Adebayo would be the player that the Phoenix Suns need to go after because if you pair Bam with Devin Booker and KD for this year and KD moves on, like you still have Bam and Devin Booker and Bam and Jimmy Butler were able to get to a finals together twice, if you count the Mickey Mouse ring. And then you have Devin Booker there. You could definitely trade someone like Bradley Beal and Yusuf Nurkic and maybe someone off of your bench as well and some draft picks for someone like Bam Adebayo. But I feel like Bradley Beal, Nurkic, and a first round pick would be enough to get him away from Miami. Then you just have to make the contracts work. But if Miami decides to go full rebuild, then being able to take on a contract like Bradley Beal would definitely fit because, like, are you really going to be able to rebuild a contender around Tyler Hero? Like, is Tyler Hero gonna turn into Steph Curry? Like, no, I don't think so. That's more like building a finals team around Klay Thompson.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think Bradley Beal and Tyler Herro would be interesting. I think they'd be a play-in tournament team like they currently are already. But Bradley Beal, good scorer, good facilitator, and then Tyler Herro, great shooter. So that pairing would work. But again, like he has a no trade clause. Does he want to go to Miami? It looks like he really likes Phoenix so far. So I guess we'll see how he pans out. But Phoenix, what they need is a better big man, and they need um, more depth because they just don't have enough. They have Grayson Allen on their bench, and then a bunch of other
Who's
players
great.
that just came off the wire, basically.
Yeah, Grayson Allen's been great for them. Like he's been one of the best 3-point shooters in the league, at least percentage wise. So maybe if you can get like Duncan Robinson as well in a trade for Bam Adebayo and pry him away from Miami, I feel like that would be a good fit for Phoenix. But I don't see them getting Jimmy Butler. Like again, it's the same problem with Bradley Beal. Just you have a better player where it's three guys who all do the same thing at a different position.
Yeah, and I feel like if they got Jimmy Butler, it'd be a rental, and it's really just to move off of Bradley Beal's contract ultimately because
Yeah.
Bradley Beal's contract's massive, and it's they still owe him so much money.
Yeah, and for the Spurs, like we just need our offense to not die when Wemby goes to the bench. And then we also need a guy who the defense needs to think about the end of the game, who can open up the floor. For Victor Wembanyama and Jimmy Butler has proven he can be a facilitator here. So you don't even need Jimmy Butler to be a scorer. You just need him asserting himself on the defensive end, where you have a perimeter guy now who can go head to head with Anthony Edwards and SGA, at least defensively, and then can get a clutch bucket, maybe one or two games in a series, and then have your offense continue to succeed when Wemby goes to the bench. And then when Wemby comes back in, he's an absolute force. Like he has the impact of two or three players on the court just with how long he is. He has the ability to erase any error on the perimeter by blocking shots inside, and then he's 7'3" and he has the wingspan. It's 7'6", I believe, 7'9", and he's out here shooting threes and he's shooting step back threes off the dribble. So I feel like with the Spurs, like they may, they may sneak into the conference championship.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we love the Thunder. The Thunder have played well. Who else is there at that point? Do we trust the Rockets yet? I personally don't. The Grizzlies, I don't trust the Grizzlies either. Nuggets can't shoot. Lakers are old. Mavericks, maybe. You can maybe shout the Mavericks, but everybody else in that conference, they're fraudulent. I feel like they could definitely sneak in there if they had to.
Yeah, especially like we've seen like Luca and LeBron. like elevate to a certain level in the playoffs where they just take these bad teams way farther than they need to go. And I feel like Wemby's that kind of talented player who can do that in the playoffs. So if you give him someone
Yeah.
like Jimmy Butler, like players like Wemby, they only need another guy or two, and then just get rid of Chris Paul because he's gonna get hurt in the first round like he usually does, or the play-in tournament, and then you're gonna be screwed.
Yeah, exactly. So I like that trade. We'll see where Jimmy Butler goes. Maybe by our next episode, most likely this upcoming Monday, that we'll know for sure where Jimmy Butler's going. And hopefully it's the Spurs. But we talked about the super wild card weekend. We talked about the FS1 fiasco. We talked about where Jimmy Butler might go and all of the head coaching hirings, where these coaches might be hiring. But most importantly, before we conclude our show, the documents are unleashed. We're entering Super Wildcard Weekend. Who is the best, brightest, greatest top five teams according to the Brickyard?
Yeah, the top 5 teams heading into Super Wildcard Weekend according to the Brickyard, and it is gonna be a fantastic Super Wildcard Weekend. And as of right now, at number 5, I have a team that's so important. It helps spur championship runs. It is one of the most coveted spots to be at. So if you're heading into Super Wildcard Weekend, this team is gonna be your best friend. That's because at number 5 is gonna be the bye week. I mean, we have the Lions and the Kansas City Chiefs perfectly out of bye. They're guaranteed to go into the next rounds. It's the best teams heading into Super Bowl wildcard weekend. Well, you're in one of the best positions here. So I'm going to shout out the bye week with the Kansas City Chiefs and Detroit Lions here because I feel like both of those teams earned a bye and you're not going to be playing this week. So you're not going to get a spot in the top 4. So at number 5, we have the bye week with the Lions and Kansas City Chiefs. Congratulations on a very hard fought week here. And then at number 4 is a team that knew everything it took and everything that this mattered with the season. And they kind of came back where a lot of people thought they were dead. Didn't really have a chance to be in the position where they are right now. So just the fact that they are where they are heading into the offseason is kind of a miracle because it came out of nowhere. But congratulations to the Tennessee Titans for getting the number 1 overall pick. No one saw this coming. No one was like, yeah, the Titans are going to get the number 1 pick. We were all romanticizing about the Raiders getting the number 1 pick or the Giants. But how about we make Nashville great again? Nashville's already one of the top music cities in the country here, already central where you have Barstool there. You kind of have a little podcast hub. Theo Vaughn hangs out there. You got Yellow Wolf, you got Jelly Roll, you got the entire country music scene there. Luke Bryan, Jason Aldean, Lainey Wilson, Johnny Cash, everyone who built that scene in Nashville. Well, it's time to milk and build a great football scene there. And now you have the number 1 overall pick. I mean, it kind of came out of nowhere and suddenly it all panned out perfectly where everyone's like, the Patriots, the Giants, the Raiders. Well, a hard fought battle. It came down to the very last moment. There are very, very high highs for the Tennessee Titans this year with Will Levis, and there were very, very low lows with Will Levis and the Titans this year. So at number 4, securing the number 1 pick, the Tennessee Titans. Congratulations. You did it right heading into Super Wildcard weekend. And that brings me to at number 3, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. Philadelphia Eagles are coming in strong to the playoffs here, where you have Lamar Jackson, who had one of the 4 greatest years for any quarterback ever, where his QBR was top 4 in NFL history. He had his best season as a pro throwing the football this year. And then you also have Derrick Henry on this team, who is going to be your major impact in the playoffs, where Derrick Henry shows up in the regular season. But some of those playoff games, I feel like people forget who Derrick Henry was. But people are about to be reminded this weekend who Derrick Henry was and in the playoffs and who he's capable of being. So I think at number 3, have to have the Baltimore Ravens heading into Super Wildcard weekend. Feel like Lamar Jackson with his MVP season, Derrick Henry, who is an MVP caliber running back in the backfield. It's going to be a tough matchup for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I have the Ravens winning and also going on to the conference championship if they get the right matchup in the second round. And then at number 2, we have a team that has played well throughout the year. They've also dealt with some injuries, kind of been a team that has fallen off a little bit. But we're ready for them to come back this year and maybe show us something in the playoffs. But you've had one of the best defenses all year long. Your quarterback's coming out of concussion protocol. You have one of the best running backs in the league this year. I'm going with the Philadelphia Eagles and Saquon Barkley, Nick Sirianni leading the charge there. You have Philadelphia, who was one of the franchises that we thought was going to be set up to be a dynasty. We had our quarterback with Jalen Hurts, and we are set up to really do something over the next few years. And we got sidetracked last year because every team who signs D Swift ends up failing in the second half of the season, unlike the Detroit Lions, who immediately started to succeed when D Swift left, immediately started to make waves in the running game where, oh, we moved on to Jameer Gibbs and David Montgomery, and then the Philadelphia Eagles and Chicago Bears offense fell off a cliff with D Swift. Now we have Saquon Barkley in that role. We have A.J. Brown on offense. We have Devontae Smith on offense. So at number two, I'm going to put the Philadelphia Eagles also because of that defense as well. It's going to be pretty hard to stop Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean. But at number one, because we believe in a thing called love on the show, because it is Toyotathon still, I believe. The Green Bay Packers are quietly one of the scariest teams that no one is talking about heading into the playoffs, where Jordan Love has been absolutely dynamic at points this season. He's been banged up, so the Packers haven't been able to really get their flow going. But when it comes time to face the Philadelphia Eagles, you believe that the Packers will rise to the challenge. I feel like it's going to be a coaching and quarterback mismatch here where Jordan Love went out there, demolished the Cowboys. Their offense looks spectacular, where Matt LaFleur always has misdirection going. We have Josh Jacobs, who's been showing up over the past few weeks and showing out here. So the Green Bay Packers, they're set up to have the biggest upset this wild card weekend. So at number one, heading into wild card weekend for the top five teams that are going to be playing, I have the Green Bay Packers. I feel like they're going to go out there and get it done, upset the Philadelphia Eagles. You like that upset? I like it too. Will we really be able to see Jalen Hurts overcome his issues with AJ Brown and the kind of rift that they've had since the last season? I think it's going to be Jordan Love who's going to be the one who has a clutch drive at the end of the game. And it was looking like that was going to happen in Brazil earlier this season.
Yeah, I love it. I believe in a thing called love. I believe in Romeo, Romeo, do art thou Romeo Dobbs. I like this list. I'm excited to see the Titans play this week. Funny enough, they're the only team who ends up getting the number one overall pick. Rare appearances on the worst top five, despite getting the number one overall pick. I never really dug into them too heavily because I knew what they were doing at the end of the day.
Yeah, and they're doing it quietly where the Patriots fans and the media was clamoring like the Patriots are going to get the number one pick. And as soon as people started talking about them getting the number one pick, they kind of fell off a little bit. So, I thought about putting the Buffalo Bills at the number one spot just to jinx them because whenever I start to wrap my arms around them and believe them, then they fall off a cliff. I'm like, oh, right. That's why I never embraced the Buffalo Bills and picked them to win anything. But, maybe I'll put them in the top five next week to jinx them. We'll see, though.
Okay. We shall see. Maybe the Titans will reappear. We don't know. But that is our top five teams according to the Brickyard. You guys can move on to this upcoming Super Wildcard weekend, knowing who are the pillars of success in this division, this upcoming wildcard round. You're not going to want to miss it. We'll be back next week to preview all the games for this upcoming week, but also recap the games for this week. You're not going to want to miss it as we dive deeper into it.
Yeah, but most importantly, while you're waiting for Super Bowl wild card weekend, while you're waiting to see some of the biggest upsets, some of the biggest surprises, maybe some upsets we saw coming but you didn't see coming. Most importantly, while waiting for football and while you're watching football on Sunday and waiting for us to come back on Monday or Tuesday, whatever day it's going to be next week, stay brick.
Day break. Beautiful. Super Wildcard weekend, baby. It's going to be
Oh
so
yeah.
super.